Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
In that way, and I wish more and more people would see it. So I'm excited to welcome to the program author Jonah Winter. Jonah, thanks for calling. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely, Jonah. You've written a variety of books. So tell us your background and the number of books you've written, and then we will get into some questions that my panel have.
Yeah, well, I've been writing picture book biographies, which is what they're called, picture book nonfiction, for about 25 years, and I've written about 30 of them, a little over 30. When I first started, the first book I wrote, Diego, in 1991, was that was before this genre even existed. So now it's turned into a real phenomenon, and you go in bookstores and there are picture book nonfiction and picture book biography sections. So I write books about a lot of different things. I write about baseball players, or I write about artists and musicians. The past couple of years, I've been really focusing on American history, specifically as it relates to social justice, and trying to cover people and events, parts of history that have not been covered in the previous books or in textbooks and in the curriculum as American children are usually taught.
All righty. So I'm curious, because you've got so many works and so much experience. How has it been going through the evolution throughout the years, doing all sorts of different books and having all sorts of different subjects? Has it been difficult? Has it, what has it been? I'm just curious, because there's so much to cover, and it just sounds like so many awesome things that I know that throughout time there's things you've probably learned or probably advanced in. So what's your point of view on that?
Well, I write about things that interest me, and sometimes I've written books that people have asked me to write. I seem to be pretty good at writing books about baseball, so and I've been a passionate baseball fan my whole life, so that's the reason for that. More recently, though, I seek out subjects like the ones I was just talking about that have to do with social justice and combating what I see to be the propaganda inherent in the American education system, vis-a-vis how American history is taught. So, I read a lot of newspapers. I read books on topics that interest me, and then I come up with ideas, and often I'll float them past editors, and before the book's even a book, the editor will say, "Wow, that's a great idea. How about, So sometimes it just starts with a proposal, and I'll get a contract and I'll write the book. And sometimes I write stories that don't get published based on esoteric interest. For instance, my manuscript, Franz Kafka's Miserable Childhood, I just can't seem to get any takers on that. But, I wrote it.
Gotcha. I appreciate it. It's always awesome to have a creative mind. That's kind of like what I've done with my art. I do digital art. It's been like throughout 5 years, and it's been such an advancement and evolution. So I appreciate it. Thank you for answering.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear about your, the different varied topics that you're writing about, Jonah. Do you find you talked about a little bit about social injustice, and a lot of times those topics come to the forefront. Do you find yourself having a motivation to change the world, or where do you get your inspiration to kind of come up with these topics?
Sure, I want to change the world, and especially after this last election, I feel like I feel fortunate that I have a tiny little bully pulpit from which to get my ideas across to children, because I honestly do think part of the problem, and a big part of the problem in this country, is education. That children aren't taught the truth about America, the difficult truths about America, and so this is kind of a new area for picture book nonfiction, because generally speaking, picture books, picture book biographies and picture book nonfiction tend to supply inspiring, positive stories, and and I myself have written many of those. But I in the past couple of years, am now getting into stories that are not so positive and that just deal with difficult parts of our history, and with the hopes that it can inspire empathy in my young readers.
That's right in Neil's wheelhouse. I mean, he's in education.
Yes. Yeah, I'm in education. I love this, and I'm just looking at your website, and the artists, the pictures are just tremendous, and I mean, just the covers. And
Yeah,
so
I
many
know.
people,
Yeah.
and I would aspire to interview every one of them alive or that have deceased. And that's one of my goals, Jonah, is to interview the most amazing people. And I've gotten some opportunities in my career interviewing celebrities and other well-known people, from a princess to specific Congress people to, very well-known people in society. Now,
That's exciting.
Did you get to talk to any of these, interview any of the people that are alive now still that you wrote the biographies for? Did you get on the phone with them and get any feedback from them or in this process? From Barack to Hillary?
Yeah, Hillary and Sonia Sotomayor. Barack was pretty busy during 2008 when I wrote that book, because I wrote it in March of 2008 and it came out in September. Yeah, he just didn't seem to have any time. Now, to tell you the truth, I mean, I did try to get in touch with the campaign, but it's a wall that is very difficult to get across. So same with Hillary, and and I mean, generally, so many of the books I write are about people who are no longer living. So my approach as a writer isn't. I mean, I think it'd be fascinating to do interviews, and it sounds like you've interviewed many interesting and various people. But yeah, that's not how I approach this. What I do, I take a lot of information from books, and I try to find a storyline that can be told in pictures with very few words, that will be emotionally and spiritually, intellectually compelling to little kids who have attention deficit disorder. So that's my job.
It's a great job. It's a very great job. And then Peter, as an artist, I'm sure you have a question for him as well, especially the beautiful illustration of these books.
Yeah, like when you're doing the illustrations, how do you go about doing them? And then how, like, are they physically made? Are they digitally made? As well as, has it evolved? Has your illustrations evolved throughout the years as the different projects that you've done?
Well, I've only illustrated 2 of my own books. I'm actually an artist too, but but the illustrations I did for my books on baseball that were published over 10 years ago, I using a brush that had a single hair on it, using a photorealist style. So it wasn't really a very practical or cost-effective method. So most of my books are illustrated by other people. Sometimes I pitch a certain illustrator to an editor if I really feel strongly that that's the illustrator who should illustrate that book. For instance, I came out with a book, Simon & Schuster, a couple of years ago called The Founding Fathers! And I proposed this book with an illustrator of mine, Barry Blitt, who's most famous for his New Yorker covers, including, I think, the one that's currently on the current New Yorker, because he's the best political satirist in the business, and I wanted someone who would have that kind of talent to illustrate the kind of book that I wanted to write about the Founding Fathers. But, I've had the real honor to have my books illustrated by truly amazing illustrators, including my own mother, Jonah Winter, who, truth be told, I kind of went into the family business. And so, in fact, she has illustrated a book of mine that's coming out in February about the making of the atom bomb, and it's called The Secret Project. And I always had her in mind as the illustrator, although it was the editor who first suggested that my mother illustrate this, and I was very happy because it meant that I wasn't just asking.
Yeah, so cool. So each book is quite literally its own work by its own artist. And I'm curious on that fact. Are they supposed to be 100% seen as different books from each other, or can you in some way, or is there connections to see them as being kind of a whole, as a writer's list of different works and projects that you've done?
Well, it's interesting. There was this one reviewer, Elizabeth Bird, who writes for School Library Journal, who said that a couple of years ago, she said that what she found amazing about my books, and I felt so flattered when she said this, was that each one of them is entirely different from the other and has an entirely different point of view, entirely different voice, entirely different look. Now, I don't know how true this is a few years later, because I've worked with some of the same illustrators on different projects. So, obviously it's the same illustrator. It's going to have a sort of similar look. That being said, this book that I just came out with on James Madison Hemings, illustrated by Terry Widener, has a totally different look from a book he illustrated of mine a few years ago called Steel Town. He's using a completely different style. So, I like for the books to be totally separate. I mean, the one exception to that are 3 books that I wrote on baseball for Random House that start with the words "You never heard of," and one of them is "You never heard of Sandy Koufax," and there's one on Willie Mays and one on Casey Stengel. And so those books obviously had a similar look and feel and were connected. But generally, I like to kind of reinvent the wheel with every book I do. That's the goal.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Jonah, what about upcoming projects? You got anything in the works or anything coming out in the near future?
Well, I just came out with the book, My Name is James Madison Hemings, which I'm going to be presenting today at 12:15 here at the Miami Book Fair. But I have a book coming out called The Secret Project this February, as I mentioned, about the making of the atom bomb. And that's coming out with Simon & Schuster. Then there's a book coming out on the same day, actually, as that book from Random House about Mickey Mantle. And then later in the year, in August, I have a book coming out on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So that's
wow.
next year. Yeah.
See, it's fantastic. I could interview you for each one of the topics because of the interview. That's what I love. Like I have interesting interviews with people that have written biographies on those unbelievable historical figures. And the research is the same. It's just the pictures and how you put them together so kids understand it. But I'm sure adults read your books as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. Some of them more than others. Yeah, I mean, some books more than others. Like my book on the Founding Fathers, a lot of adults that I know seem to like that book. It's packed with information. And, I mean, it sort of presents the Founding Fathers in baseball card type form with statistics and, position on the Boston Tea Party, height, weight, position on slavery, slaves owned. And so a lot of adults really seem to value that book. But, I think a few of my books seem to hit a nerve with parents and with adults, with librarians, et cetera, et cetera.
Roberto Clemente is the one I'm the most interested in, Jonah, because of Pittsburgh. Trust me on that one, Roberto. Yes.
Oh, are you from Pittsburgh?
Yes, I live in Pittsburgh. I'm outside,
really?
Right? Yeah.
Oh, that's where I live too.
Oh, really, Jonah? Oh my gosh,
that's where I live.
We're in Pittsburgh. I live in Gibsonia.
I live in Dormont.
In Dormont. Okay, well, we need to have coffee sometime.
Yeah,
so I will make sure. I'll get Lisa Pale to give me your contact info.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have coffee sometime because I'd love to talk to you about your different books and different things. Interesting, very interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I wrote the Roberto Clemente book before I had even made the decision to move to Pittsburgh because when I was a little kid, he was my favorite baseball player. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, he was it as far as I was concerned. And I still treasure the baseball card I have of him. And
wow, that's good.
But it wasn't until I moved to Pittsburgh that I realized exactly how much he's worshipped in Pittsburgh. I mean, I talk to people who still get teary-eyed whenever his name comes up, and it's just really that's an amazing thing, because he's been gone for a while, but he still matters so much to so many people.
I interviewed Roberto Clemente Jr., and he's a great guy, fantastic guy.
Really?
Yeah. And we had a really nice convo about his dad. But all right, good talking to you. And also another person, Al Oliver, talked about in our interview how much of a mentor Roberto Clemente was. I'll have to send you that link to that interview with Al. I think that would be interesting, for sure. All right, well, Jonah, good networking, and we'll definitely connect sometime, man. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice talking to you.
All right, nice talking to you, too. All right, Jonah, best place to find info is go to jonahwinter.com because I got his website up, and you can check with him all those different things. So, Jonah, thanks for calling, and enjoy yourself, man, at the festival.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thanks.
You're listening to Author's Corner, powered by Life Improvement Radio, live from the Mind Book Fair. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.